Hey everyone, before this week's episode of Still Loading gets started, I just have a quick announcement to make. I forgot to mention it during the recording of this episode, so I wanted to kind of put it up front. I am going to be recording my first ever live episode of the Still Loading podcast on June 15th at Classic Game Junkie in Glenside, Pennsylvania. You can check out their Facebook page. Just search Classic Game Junkie on Facebook and it'll be easy to find. They're doing a free video game day event on June 15th, and I'm going to be recording live on the street, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'm going to be interviewing and talking to people who are waiting in line for their free video games, and also talking with my co-host for this episode, which will be Casey, who you may remember from Mario Month last year, and who will be on Mario Month again this year. I got a good Mario Month for you up ahead. You just wait. So yeah, I just wanted to let you all know, and I hope to see you all there. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited and a little nervous, but very excited for my first live episode, and I think that's it. So now, on with the show. On this episode of Still Loading, Naughty Dog Part 3, the finale. Hello all, and welcome back to this episode of Still Loading, or I guess welcome to another episode of Still Loading. For this week's episode, we are finishing up the Naughty Dog series that I've been doing. This one is finally not scripted. This one's more actually going to have a conversation. It's nice to actually be in the room with someone else when I'm recording a podcast for once. So, making his Still Loading return after, 3-4 years?
Yeah, at least 3.
Tristan, who was with me on the Ratchet and Clank episode. So Tristan, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
So I invited you back because, one, I know you're a big Naughty Dog fan, like probably one of the most hardcore Naughty Dog fans that I know. It sounds weird out of context, but it's funny because you and I have both been fans of both Naughty Dog and Insomniac for years now, and so I had you on for the Ratchet and Clank episode. I should do an Insomniac history series.
I'm totally down for Insomniac.
Oh my god, I love Insomniac. Those their newest game, Spider-Man. Did you play Spider-Man yet?
No, I haven't gotten to Spider-Man yet.
You will love it. It's really good. It's very, very, very good. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Insomniac. We're here to talk about Naughty Dog. So for those who have been following along with this series about the history of Naughty Dog, you'll know that I've left out a large portion of their history. I've left out all of the parts about their actual games. I focused a lot on their creators, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, and I talked about their history prior to Naughty Dog and post Naughty Dog and what they've been up to. I did actually find out a little bit more about Jason Rubin. Those who listened to last week's episode, 2 weeks ago now, but the last episode, they'll know that I didn't really find a whole lot on him. He really didn't have a whole lot of info. The only other thing I found is what college he went to, and I actually didn't write it down about it. So good on me. I think he went to college in Wisconsin, though, or Michigan, or something like that. It's funny because I couldn't find it anywhere but on this, randomly hidden in this big Naughty Dog piece on IGN. They had it, just one tiny thing. So, but anyway, so we're going to dive into the first couple games that Naughty Dog made prior to their big famous breakout in Crash Bandicoot. And then we're just going to go in and talk about all the games, just pretty much all of them. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail on all of them, just kind of talk about them, what we remember about them, what we liked about them. But for a full breakdown of it, I actually want to save that for a full episode. For maybe not for all of them, but I like being able to do a full episode on an individual game. Even I always feel like we're able to fill time. Well, when I'm with someone, I can fill time on a specific game if we like it and know enough about it. So, So after the last couple episodes, I left out right when they started making games, back when Andy and Jason first started making them, and their original development team name was actually called Jam Software, which stood for Jason and Andy's Magic. Kind of a crude acronym.
A little on the nose.
Yeah.
Right.
But so Jason and Andy's Magic, and their first game was actually an educational game called Math Jam. and they publish it. And this was back in the old Apple II days. So if you self-publish something, all you would do is you would get a bunch of floppy disks, put the game on a bunch of floppy disks, and then also print out your own little versions of instruction manuals, and you put it all together in a Ziploc bag, and that was how you packaged it. That was it. There's no like production materials. It was just crudely made like manual out of like, you just print at Staples or whatever they had back then, and a Ziploc bag and a floppy disk. I think that, I don't know, I find that really charming, actually.
Yeah, very DIY.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, apparently there's a lot of stories, if you like dig into it, that's how like self-published Apple II and like old Mac games and stuff like that were all made. Is just, they would just get a bunch of floppy disks, and that's how they distributed. But after that, or they tried to get it into schools, and it bombed, because as soon as they tried to get into schools, the school districts were like, yeah, this is great. You need to get this approved by 3 psychologists and have 16 teachers sign off on it. And they're like 14 years old at the time of this.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So they just kind of went, no, we're good, thanks. And at least on IGN, they described it as the educational bureaucracy. And part of me was like, come on, you're not going to let the kids put a game in, but at the same time, like, you're trying to educate children. So it's like, you want to make sure that what you're putting into the schools is actually worthwhile to children, Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I mean, I went to high school. I don't know how true any of that is, but
yeah, I wonder. It probably wasn't too relevant to the educators, the age of the kids who made the games. But like, as someone who can really appreciate, like, when you're 14 making a full-fledged game, like, that's really impressive.
It's a lot of work. Their second game, though, after that, was once they decided that the whole education or edutainment game system was a racket and they just didn't want to deal with it, they went into they made their first full-fledged game. It was called Ski Crazed. It was still under the Jam title. They had not changed the Naughty Dog yet. And Ski Crazed was a simple, like, almost like an obstacle course platformer, kind of in the same vein of Pitfall or something like that, where, I mean, it's one continuously moving screen, unlike Pitfall, but it's essentially just a series of obstacles where you have to jump over, dodge, stuff like that. It's from a side perspective. Now, these games I will go into, because I can't picture doing a full episode on Ski Craze, something I'll never be able to play.
Sure.
But basically, it's a 45-degree angle, and you're playing as someone who's skiing, and you have to jump over things, jump over puddles and stuff like that. It's very strange. Like, the obstacles don't make a whole lot of sense, what I saw in the video. But what I thought was kind of cool is that every time you failed, they would have some comedic death animation. So if, like, you tripped on something, he'd roll into a snowball and roll down the hill. And then a second later, if you still had lives, you'd see him crawling back up the hill, get back up onto the exact same spot that he died at, and just continue on. And there was a bunch of different ways. Once you lost all your lives, that's when all of a sudden a stretcher would come out and pick you up and haul you off. Right. And it has the worst sound design I've ever seen in my life, or listened to in my life. The sound effects are atrocious. If you want your ears to bleed, look it up on YouTube. You can find a clip. It's pretty bad. The next game after that is finally when they decided to get a publisher. I think they actually might have had a publisher for Ski Crazed as well. The next game was called Dream Zone. It was kind of like Myst, but with bad graphics. And I'm quoting that from Jason from that IGN article with Naughty Dog. It was basically just a point-and-click adventure type of thing. I didn't get to see any screenshots of it, but I'm kind of curious about it. Now, what was interesting, though, the transition from Ski Craze to Dream Zone, was how they did their art. So when they made Ski Crazed, for example, they had no way of making art for their games. They knew how to program games, but they didn't know how to, like, make art for it necessarily. Like, there was no Photoshop to make sprites on. There was no Illustrator or any other programs that we use now. What they did was they used, there was like a pinball machine maker that on the Apple II that they had. They would actually use the sprite work from that, and in the game's engine modify it, and then export it out of that into their game. So they created their artwork out of a pinball machine, like emulator software creator suite. What's even more crazy is that there's no way natively to do that with the software. So what they do is they would create their sprite or whatever they were doing and then they would have to hard reset the computer, and when the ROM would dump, they would just catch it before it would delete and export it over to their. So when the temporary system memory after that happened, they would catch all that temp system memory and then sift out whatever they needed and then put it into their game. How crazy is that?
That's hardcore, man.
I can't even fathom, like, I don't know computers well enough. Like, I understand conceptually what happened, but I have no idea how that works. That's just sorcery to me. And they would do stuff like that all the time. And thankfully, between Ski Crazed and what they ended up doing in Dreams, and they got essentially a better engine that they could do this all with. So a lot's changed since then, obviously. When I was reading that, it hurt my brain figuring out, like, how would you figure that out? Like, how would you get from point A to point B to even get to that? So then after they finished Dream Zone, their publisher, I think it was like Bombville or Baudeville. I can't remember 100%, but they were dissatisfied with them. Apparently they classified them, quote unquote, as stoners. On more than one occasion, even though they never saw anything, the one one of the higher ups in Baudeville would say, "Chill out, man," or something like that, something along those lines. So they didn't really like their vibe. On top of that, they were just bad at their job. They didn't have a wide reach. The game would just not end up in stores at times, and it was overall their service as a publisher was not very good.
So this is the publisher that were the stoners.
Yes, the publisher was the stoner. I mean, who knows? I don't know anything about Andy and Jason. No judgment either way, but
yeah, you figure you got two kind of younger guys hanging out making a game.
You're right. They were
totally
like 15 and 16, and they're dealing with these stoners, like, not distributing it properly. Well, after that, because Dream Zone sold pretty well for them, they actually signed up with EA. That's when their first game they made for EA was an RPG game named Keith the Thief. And they actually wanted it to be a straightforward, like a very serious, dark RPG, but EA was like, no, it has to be comedic. You have to add comedy in it. And EA even hired a writer for them to help them out with it. Well, the game sold pretty well, but EA is like, well, actually, you know what? Maybe it would have been better if you didn't go with the comedy route. And they're like, you're the one that told us to do the comedy route. We didn't even want to do it. So that was even though that was a problem, they still didn't hate working with EA. And then the next game they released was Rings of Power, which actually was released on the Sega Genesis. So it was their first console game. And if I remember correct, actually, sorry, I missed something major. Keith the Thief was the first game that they made under the Naughty Dog moniker. So that is where Naughty Dog starts. It's no longer Jam. It's Naughty Dog from there on out. And then they make Rings of Power, like I said, for the Sega Genesis, and the game was huge. I mean, it was a big RPG for the Sega Genesis, and while they liked the game, they hated making games for cartridge-based systems just because it was so cost prohibitive. Like, the overhead was nuts on those things because you would have to buy all your cartridges beforehand and hope that you make your money back, and they're not cheap to manufacture. So after Rings of Power, while they had more creative freedom than they did with Keith the Thief, they decided to basically just say, fuck Electronic Arts. Not because they were doing awful, but it wasn't worth it anymore. Like, it was too hard to make games for it. And funny story though, Rings of Power, when they were making it for the Genesis, they got their hands on an early dev kit, but it wasn't an official one from Sega. Like, they had to sign an NDA at the time. Because EA had reverse engineered a Sega Genesis for themselves to develop on prior to Sega giving them the okay to develop on it, as well as any legitimate development kits. So the reverse engineered one they use themselves. And remember, they were only 14 when they made their first game. They're in college right now, so they're still not even out of school, and they're developing for EA at the moment, right? So they had this Genesis development kit in their dorm, but because it was so hacked together and reverse engineered and not well done at all, it actually caused a shitload of electronic interference. So when they turned it on, everyone's TVs around them static would just like you could still see, but it was static all over the screen, and it would just create an awful like sound. And like apparently everyone was pissed, but no one knew it was him or it was them. This was my favorite part, just going with like Naughty Dog ingenuity. It used to be a nuisance, but then they realized they could know when the game crashed because the sound of the static would change when the game would crash, because now it's emitting a different electronic like frequency, I guess. I don't know, like that type of shit's just like fascinating to me. So yeah, and now we're on to the last game prior to Crash Bandicoot. Like I know I've been talking a lot, and Tristan, you've just been listening, but after this, then we can dive in, and this is Crash Bandicoot is coming shortly. So the last game they made prior to Crash Bandicoot, prior to their breakout, was called Way of the Warrior, and it was developed for the 3DO. Didn't really do well, of course, but Trip Hawkins, the guy who created EA, who their whole shtick was actually to credit developers, electronic artists. That's what EA originally stood for. Oh, I guess still technically does. They just don't act that way. But they actually, treated their developers with care because they were electronic artists. Trip Hawkins, the guy who created it, left once the company went public, and that's another reason why they left, was because while Rings of Power sold decently well, the company shifted focus to Madden, and it kind of makes sense with where they are now, where they're pretty much the only reason they're still in business is their sports games.
Yep.
Arguably.
FIFA now, I guess, but...
Well, Madden's still huge, but is FIFA more popular than Madden worldwide?
I think worldwide, yeah. Soccer's like the thing over in Europe, and that's where all the microtransactions come from. That's what's keeping them going.
Well, Europe's also the one trying to get rid of microtransactions, I'm pretty sure, right?
That's interesting. I think they're trying to get rid of the
loot boxes.
Which I don't think that EA has been doing. At least not.
They kind of do. So I have NHL 19, and I really like it, but they have this thing called Hockey Ultimate Team, and there's always they have basically stuff like that in all their sports games where you get full access to every player they have on their roster in the game, and you can craft your own team together with it. But instead of just picking and choosing and just, making a star-studded team, it's all luck-based. Like, you have these card packs that you can either buy with in-game currency, which is a lot, and it takes hours to get, or you can just spend real-life money on it. And I can tell you now, I spent $20 on it, just for various packs. Not worth the money.
Yep.
The return you get is shit, and I'm tempted because they once again they're good at marketing with it. Like, it looks all shiny, it looks really cool. I'm like, oh, could be good stuff in that pack. That's the gambling mentality right there. Like, oh, it could be good, but it's not guaranteed. They even entice you, telling you like, oh, you're guaranteed 2 rares. They don't tell you which rares though. Like, there's bronze, silver, and gold. But there's rares of each bronze, silver, and gold. You have regular, and then you have rare versions of bronze, silver, and gold players. And when they say 2 rares, yeah, it's 2 rares, but it doesn't mean it's the rares you want. It's the bronze rares or the silver rares, the ones that no one gives a shit about. So they still kind of do stuff like that. But anyway, they were focusing on Madden. So Naughty Dog left, and they got contacted with Trip Hawkins, the person who was the founder of EA, but no longer worked there and had since quit. And they had actually decided to stop making games for a short while. And in fact, Jason moved to California and started his own 3D modeling company. And he was actually contacted by a Hollywood studio to do effects in a film, and then Trip Hawkins came calling, and they decided, we'll make something. So they made this game called Way of the Warrior, and it's just a fighting game. It's a simplistic fighting game. What is interesting though is that it is the best indie movie game you'll ever see. When I indie movie, I don't mean it's based off an indie movie. I mean the way they made it is so indie. It's fantastic. So Andy was trying to go. He was in MIT at the moment, trying to get a degree through there. I don't know if it's a doctorate. Well, I don't know what can you get through MIT. It was higher than bachelor's. I don't know what it would be.
Maybe bachelor's and then master's and then doctorate.
I think it was master's then. He was working on his master's at MIT, and he convinced Jason to come back from California to help him out with it. So he did, and they wanted to make digitized characters, kind of like how old Mortal Kombat did, but they didn't really have any of the means to do it. They didn't have a green screen, so they hung up a tarp, filmed people in front of the tarp, and had to painstakingly chisel out pixel by pixel their digitized versions from the backdrop to put it into the game. And they would work hours on this, hours and hours for this, and they couldn't hire any actors, so it was just friends. And there's actually a lot, like, they go into it in the article, and I don't remember all the names, but there's a lot of famous people. Like, there's apparently a famous professor of robotics who's digitized and in the game. Like, it's kind of crazy. So they brought that game, the last bit of their money, they spent everything. They were down. Jason said he had like $6 left to his name. Andy had more because he was getting scholarships to go to MIT, but that was pretty much about it. And they spent the last bit of money they had, like the last 10 grand they had, to get a booth at a consumer electronics show, I think CES or whatever. And they got a little 10-foot booth, like a tiny booth, and it worked because by the end of it, everyone saw these crappy multimedia games, because that's what the 3DO was. It was a shitty multimedia system that could play games. And they were blown away by it, and it started a bidding war between 3DO, Crystal Dynamics, actually, who later went on to make Tomb Raider, and Universal Studios. And they were this close to going with 3DO and with the 3DO company, but Universal said, we'll pay for your next game and you have creative freedom. And they went with that. And that deal would ultimately lead to Crash Bandicoot. So there we are. That is an abbreviated version of what happened, even though, we're like 20 minutes in of just me like not pontificating, just like talking about this. Is that the right word? Is pontificate?
It sounds right.
It sounds smart, though, right?
It does,
so
yes.
We'll go with that.
I'm not an English professor, but I will definitely give you the points for that one.
Good news, everyone. So now we are here to talk about the one and only Crash Bandicoot. So you were telling me beforehand, we're going to kind of talk Crash Bandicoot in a nebulous way. We're not going to go through game by game, because essentially Naughty Dog has been really good with the way they've developed games. They've gone through in their series. They would do all the Crash Bandicoot games, and they move on to Jak and Daxter. Do all the Jak and Daxter games, and move on to Uncharted. Uncharted's really the first time where they switched to another franchise, which was Last of Us, and then went back to Uncharted, actually for a good couple of games. Now they're going to be bringing Last of Us back soon, right? So you said your first game, though, was Crash 2.
Yep. Yeah, when I I was, I don't know, 6 or 7, so like 96, 97. Parents got me a PlayStation 1 because my best friend in elementary school had one. And the first game they got me was Crash Bandicoot 2.
I remember, because we've been friends for a while now, I remember vividly that when we first started hanging out, your parents wouldn't let you buy any game, or wouldn't get you any games that involved shooting people, so they'd find other stuff around it. Was that like the start of that?
I think at that point I wasn't really interested in like shooters, and I don't think for anything on PS1 it was like Crash, Spyro, Final Fantasy, Brave Fencer Musashi.
Did you play Final Fantasy originally? I thought I got you into it later on. I know you played Brave Fencer Musashi, though. You had the 8 demo, right?
Yeah, I had the Final Fantasy 8 demo. But you're probably right. It probably wasn't until I met you that I was like, you know what? I should actually get Final Fantasy 8 and 7 and 9 and kind of go from there.
So good. I already did. I know I did. I did those games a while ago on like a Final Fantasy PlayStation. That was like 5 years ago now, or something like that. Maybe not that long ago. I want to do it again though. Like I give Final Fantasy 7 a full episode, 8 a full episode, 9 a full episode. Like just go into it. But so the Crash Bandicoot series I always thought was interesting because I talked about it actually a little bit in the first episode of this whole Naughty Dog series of when I first came across Crash. When I first came across Crash 2. That is a tongue twister. And talked about how I was over at a friend's birthday party and it was in like some PlayStation was hooked up in a closet. I don't remember why. But it was like a hall. I don't know how to describe it. It's like You ever walk into someone's house and it's like, this is what I remember. I could be completely wrong with this. I don't even remember whose house this was. But it was like, you walk into someone's house and it's like they have a closet, but it's also kind of like a washroom for like washer and dryer and stuff like that. So like you have a hallway, but the closet is to the like on the side, on like the sides of the walls, essentially like that. And it's just a big closet with like big sliding doors. It is kind of like that, but that was the whole hallway, and they had it open, and like the TV was in the closet, kind of like that. So it wasn't like a small room. It was like off to the side of a hallway where people could walk in and out and walk past you and whatnot.
Sure.
But so yeah, that was my first experience with Crash. And what was like what drew you to the series? Like what do you like about the series?
I think when it first started, it was just that my friend had it, and that's like what I wanted to play. And I mean, the commercials were great. Like
he just shows up at Nintendo's headquarters and starts calling them out.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know what was happening at the time because it's like, I'm just a stupid kid. I don't understand anything. But seeing the dude in the big like Crash mascot suit, just like with his big, what do you call it, microphone?
Yeah, megaphone.
Megaphone, thank you. Yeah, and just yelling random shit at people. He's like on a freeway, like yelling at people driving by. It's like, this is great.
It's the 90s in-your-face marketing that we all come to know and love.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about it, it started with, like, the Genesis. With like they had a whole campaign called Genesis Does What Nintendo Don't. And, I mean, interesting pun, I guess. But I actually think it's clever. I don't know. But then, I mean, it kind of makes sense because it worked for them. So PlayStation's like, we can do that, but we actually have a mascot that can talk. Well, they made him talk. I guess like the only thing he says in the game is like the whoa, wow. Did you see? There's a meme I saw recently about Crash Bandicoot where you see him running with like the mask. Like, it was a Uka Uka, right? Is that his?
Uka Uka is the bad one.
Uka Uka.
Aku Aku is the good one.
Aku's. I'm glad you remember this. He's running with Aku though, and he gets stopped by Cortex. He's like, "Wait a minute, how's that staying on your face?" And the mask goes, and it cuts around to the other side, and it's just two wooden butt cheeks holding onto Crash's nose. And it's just this awkward looking like round thing. Like, what is that? I was laughing. I'll see if I could find that and put a link or something like that. Though I don't know if I want to put a link up of wooden butt cheeks. Why not? But anyway, so one thing I liked about the Crash Bandicoot games was that it was almost like the logical progression of what a platformer should be in 3D. Like, it took the 2D concept and just rotated it instead of like it felt very much like 2.5D, but it was still fully 3D, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're running towards the screen, everything's 3D, but realistically, it's a 2.5D thing where like you're pretty much just running in one direction. You may have to like change it a little bit, but for the most part, the third dimension doesn't play a huge. It does have an effect on it because you have that interesting slanted perspective. But
I think there were a handful of levels where you'd be going straight, and then the camera would kind of pull back a little bit. Then you'd be going like to platforms to the left, and then kind of forward again and back. But it wasn't like Super Mario 64 or anything where you have like a free roaming camera that you're.
Well, that was also Mario 64 was the inspiration for Jak and Daxter. Because of that, Crash Bandicoot came out before Mario 64, and there's a great interview, you can watch it on YouTube, of like, it was like the making of the Jak and Daxter HD remakes, and they kind of do this big thing where they talk to the developers at Naughty Dog who were there at the time, and they were just talking about how they were just floored by what they saw with Mario 64. They couldn't believe like what was happening with it. And so while like Crash Bandicoot's still a great game, they were like very much in awe of what they did with Mario 64. That's not taking anything away from Crash. I'm not gonna like go all into like Mario 64, but I always find it interesting how like it, like, that competition has bred a lot of great games through it, because Jak and Daxter, or because Mario 64 exists, Jak and Daxter became what it was, and I love Jak and Daxter.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I love, one of the things they always talk about is that their nickname for the game was just Crash His Ass because the camera's fixated on his butt the whole time as it runs through. What was one of your favorite levels? Like, what was your favorite? If you can't remember specifics, which I wouldn't expect you to, but like, what's your favorite type of level in Crash Bandicoot?
So I distinctly remember not liking the ones where the boulders were chasing you, and like I don't know that I was necessarily like a really nervous, neurotic kid. But those ones just, like, I couldn't handle. So I would always be like, Dad, I need you to beat this level for me.
Hits you right in the anxiety.
Yeah. It was just, like, I could do maybe, like, the first half of the level, but, you know, like, there's a Triceratops coming after me, and it's just like, I can't react quick enough with my feeble 7-year-old fingers, you know?
It's funny because that was the level that actually got me hooked on Crash Bandicoot. Like, I loved those levels because it was just fun. I don't know, did you get the Insane Trilogy?
Yeah.
I've heard stories that it's harder than the original.
So I can't really speak to that because, like, I can remember
originals, I should say.
Yeah, I can remember the originals being hard, but again, that was like a different time in my life where those are the first games that I was ever playing.
Yeah,
and I'm like much better at games now, so they're still difficult, but I actually thought they were kind of easier.
Really?
Now that might just be because I'm like I have a better understanding of games and controls and stuff. But
I tried playing it at my brother's place, and I kept misjumping. Like I kept not misjumping, I kept misjudging the distances. And I'm like, I'm good at 3D platformers. Like I'm not necessarily bad at them, so I don't know why I'm so bad at this. I was under the impression that maybe because they made it too realistic, well, quote unquote realistic, but they made it almost too perfect, I should say. Like, the controls are more tight than they were in the original. So the original one, they worked the gameplay around the limitations and they kind of accounted for it. But when you update it to have everything be more accurate in terms of like responses and like also landings, like like you have to be more pixel perfect on your landings than you did on the original. But I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't played the original because they could be just as equally as hard.
I think what I had heard is that so in the originals the jumping worked a little bit differently between like the first and then the last two. But with the remakes they kind of like found a happy medium between those. So the jumping is a little bit different. So it's not necessarily harder to do. It's just like you need to kind of wrap your head around it.
I'll have to try it. I don't have the Insane Trilogy. Same with the Spy. I don't have the Reignited Trilogy.
You know, I almost brought the Insane Trilogy with me, but I was like, he probably has it. I don't need to bring it.
I know, right? Knowing me with my collection. I was watching, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I was watching a YouTube video of this girl who was a collector as well, and she was saying how she's like, I know some people may laugh at my over 1,000 games compared to other collectors, and I was thinking like, that's a lot of fucking games.
That's a lot of games, man.
Like,
yeah.
I don't have 1,000 yet. I'm vastly approaching. It may look like I have 1,000, but I don't have 1,000.
Definitely looks like you have at least 1,000 in here.
Believe if you count my Steam library, yes. If you don't count my Steam library, which I don't, then no. I'm very close though. I'm like upper 900s right now, so I'm pretty damn close. And I haven't added a couple extra in, but I'm going to a convention this summer, so that I don't think I would be able to get an extra 40 games for what my budget is right now. So I don't think I'm going to get that. I could just go to the bottom of the barrel and just go like, I made 1,000. Here we go.
Yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit games that nobody really cares about.
Here's all the Maddens.
Yeah. You got NHL 2002, 2003, 2004.
I got all those at thrift stores, actually. There's a thrift store near me, and they almost always have sports games. So I'm like, I'll pay $1 for a sports game. Like, that's not bad. Mm-hmm. At that same thrift store, though, I also got Crash Team Racing.
Oh, right on.
Right? For like, I think I paid like $3. It's like a $20 game, I think.
Hot take. Crash Team Racing is my favorite kart racer.
That's what there's a whole thing. So, you know what I would love? Oh my God, this is a great idea for an episode. Copyright me. It would be a great idea for an episode to compare the kart racers. Like I'll do an episode on each of them. But the big ones that people debate all the time, Crash Team Racing, Mario Kart 64, and Diddy Kong Racing for the N64. Everyone's always comparing, which one's better, this and that. I should find people who, I'm assuming you're Crash Team Racing. You just said it's your favorite.
Yep.
So I'd have you on it. I'd have someone who likes Mario 64 a lot, and I'd have someone on who likes Diddy Kong Racing a lot, and just debate it out. Oh my god, that'd actually be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, so a big thing for why I like Crash so much is because that was my first game, my first platformer. I had no experience with like the NES or the SNES. I didn't play any Mario games until I think Super Mario Land on the Game Boy. So like, I'm sure that has something to do with it, that I just have like no nostalgia for Mario, that I'm like not super keen on Mario Kart.
No, it makes sense.
But I can remember playing Diddy Kong Racing at my cousin's place, because I guess they were off at like college or something. And so I was staying at their parents' house, and they busted out the N64, and I was like, shit, man, yeah, Diddy Kong Racing, let's go.
It's funny because like if you talk to Mario Kart enthusiasts, that's a weird idea that's out there, but they exist. Not that it's weird to like Mario Kart that much, just the idea of it just kind of took me by surprise there for a second. But a lot of people actually think Mario Kart 64 is one of the weaker of the Mario Kart games. I don't have an opinion on it because I'm not a big Mario Kart fan in general. Like it's weird. I recently did a blog post on misplaced nostalgia about, things you feel nostalgic for but you never really experience, and Mario Kart's one of them. Every time I look at a Mario Kart game, I'm like, oh man, such good times, and I'm like, wait, I didn't play this game, but it just something about it just feels nostalgic for me. So it's weird. Like I don't like playing them, but I've always liked them. It's very strange. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, so Crash Bandicoot. They made 3 games for the PlayStation 1. Crash, Crash 2 Cortex Strikes Back, right?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
And then Crash 3 Warped. And then they did Crash Team Racing. So they made 4 games.
Also Crash Bash.
Did they make Crash Bash?
I'm pretty sure it's got the Naughty Dog insignia on the box.
I will look it up while we're talking. But no, they made... I could have sworn they did not make Crash Bash. But they made those 4 games. No, it was made by Eurocom and Sony Games.
Mark Cerny.
I believe so.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Cerny Games founder Mark Cerny. I don't know what if they're
very
still
well known for Knack.
I liked Knack.
Okay.
I liked Knack. Not everyone else. No one else likes Knack, but I liked Knack. I never played the second one. I mean, Knack is pretty much just a tech demo for the PS4, though. Like, that's...
The particle effects and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and even then, it's like, it's cool, but it's like, nothing like that's that crazy. Yeah, I can't find anything on... I see something on Mark Cerny, which he kind of looks like Dana Carvey to me, a little bit.
Totally. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I definitely see it, yeah.
Which is weird. It's not weird to think, but so hold on. He was born in 1964. Okay, that makes more sense. I thought he was like as young as he was when Jason and Andy and Naughty Dog started, but I still can't believe they started making games when they were 14.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Well, Ski Craze, their first game, it was originally programmed in... Oh my gosh, I just read it earlier this morning and I can't remember what it is. But it was in a language that I think it was written in BASIC, and it was going really slow, so Andy took over and wrote it in assembly. And assembly, just like that, is like, I don't know, you know the Narnia books?
Mm-hmm.
It reminds... I classify assembly as the deeper magic in the Narnia books. Like, you have deep magic from the dawn of time, but then you have deeper magic before the dawn of time. That's assembly.
It's like command line type stuff?
Pretty much. It's the programming code that's used to make computer parts interact with each other. So prior to putting your operating system on it, it's all the programming built into the hardware itself. Which is just like nuts to me. But anyway, so yeah, they made those 4 games, and then they moved on to the PS2, and they made Jak and Daxter, and that was a groundbreaking game. Which one was your favorite of the Jak and Daxters? I think you've played all 3, right?
I've played all 3, at least twice, for all of them. Precursor Legacy, still my favorite.
I agree, 100%. I think I love what they do with the story in the second and third one, and a lot of people like the second and third one more just because of like because of the story. But the gun combat in that game, I just can't. You know what I'm saying?
I was thinking about that earlier today, where the early Ratchet and Clank games, I think, had a very similar problem, where since you didn't have that like lock strafe mode yet, it was just a lot of it was kind of left up to chance, where you're just like kind of spinning and shooting and like hoping that you're hitting your targets.
Yeah.
Where it was just really hard to like actually aim the guns. I think if that wasn't an issue, I would have liked them a lot more.
And they could have done something with it, but like I mean, like Ratchet and Clank, I still think figured it out by the second game though, with going commando. Like you don't have the lock strafe, but you have like almost like what like FPS controls are now. You know, like up, forward, backwards. I think you had to hold a button to strafe left and right in Ratchet and Clank, but even so, that wasn't like too obnoxious.
It was obnoxious enough that when I played it on PS2, I didn't realize you could do that, and I would get really stuck. And I can remember the one level that was like, you're in a city and everything's really red.
Keep going.
And there's like helicopters, and it was just like I needed to snipe everything because I couldn't run in there because I didn't know how to strafe, and I would just die immediately.
Okay,
but
I think I know what you're talking
playing
about.
it again on the remakes, it was like, this is so easy. What was the problem back then?
Well, even on the original one, you just had to hold a button to strafe. That was literally it. So it wasn't like, but so it's just interesting because like Insomniac seemed to figure it out right away, but like the controls are like. For that portion, I couldn't get into. All the platforming controls from the original onward are fantastic. Like they still hold up really well. I still think the original Jak and Daxter has some of the best like solid, comfortable controls of any like 3D platformer. Period. Like I like Mario 64 well enough. Granted, it was a generation prior to that, but like it just I always felt 100% in control of Jak and Daxter. Like it always just felt comfortable to me. I also like the personality of that game. Like every time you collect a power cell and they do a different dance type of thing. It was definitely much more kiddie, but that's what I liked about it.
Yeah, it had like a kind of a lighthearted feel to it, and it was I think what I like the most about it is that it's really the logical progression from Crash Bandicoot, because you still have your like double jump, your spin, your kind of slide attacks. Pretty sure you could slide in Jak and Daxter, right?
Yeah, you could do like that weird like slide into an uppercut.
Yeah, right. And it's it's open world, and there's like you don't really see loading screens between areas, and it was really like an impressive leap in like a generational leap.
And what's
in development.
nuts is that's like a launch window game or close to a launch window game. It was an early game in the PS2 life cycle that just. It's an impressive game from a technical standpoint, especially for the hardware. I remember watching watching that same documentary about the making of the Jak and Daxter HD remakes, and they were saying how like they did stuff that you weren't technically supposed to do, that Sony didn't want you to do. Like they would, since the PS2 was backwards compatible, they would like basically distribute some of the workload onto the PS1 processor for that to do some of the rendering and do some of the work and whatnot, and then send it back to the PS2 processor type of thing. So they literally crammed everything they could out of that system. And it's funny because the guys who did the HD remake, I think is Mass Media were the developers who did the HD remakes of Jak and Daxter, the Jak series, excuse me. They were saying how like going through the old code was awful, and it cuts to one of the Naughty Dog guys saying, "Yeah, we wrote it not thinking anyone else would read this in like 30 years."
Right? Yeah.
Like, why would we have taken notes? Why? Like they go back and it's just like they were in shock with how they did what they did on the PS2. I can't praise this like little mini documentary thing enough. It's so good. But the series got really good though. I liked how it. Do you remember like if you got all 100 power cells that you would get like that secret ending? Do you know what I'm talking about?
So I've gotten the secret ending for Precursor Legacy.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, yes. That really leads you into the second game with how how you kind of got to that new world, or I guess somewhere different.
It's spoilers. The future. Yeah, spoilers. Yeah, it's the future. I also liked how Naughty Dog didn't make it, but I liked how they let someone use their license or use Jack and Daxter, and they made the Daxter game for the PSP, which is the story of what happens in between 1 and 2, which it was a fun game. But yeah, they switched over to Jack 2, and all of a sudden it's basically like teen Grand Theft Auto.
Right, yeah.
Which I actually really liked because I couldn't play Grand Theft Auto. I loved the stealing of cars was actually a lot of fun in that game.
Yeah, I feel like if you're in a mission where you have like a time limit or like you need to survive and like get something somewhere, mostly time limit things, it drove me nuts and I like hated it.
Because the streets were so crowded.
Right, yeah, and it's like you don't want to hit cops because if you do, then everybody's after you and it's a nightmare. But if you're not in a mission and you're just like driving around doing whatever the heck you want and you're just like wreaking havoc and running people over and you're jumping in like the what's the one that's like two motorcycles kind of like
I know what you're
together?
talking about.
Like,
It was almost like a tan gold like sheen to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But it was like the
or brown
kind of like tandem style. Yeah, and it was like if you saw one of those, you quick jump up, grab that, and you just like go on a rampage. And that was always really fun, just kind of like run around until you get killed.
I always remember dicking around in it where like if I wanted to mess with someone, then I would get down to the lower street level because you would hit like R2 or L2 and it would change you like your two different altitudes. You had like a higher level where all the cars were at and then a lower level where all the people were walking. So you'd go down to the lower level where all the people were walking and you would wait for someone you decided just to not like to pass over you. And while they're above you, you hit the button to switch altitudes, so you ram them up from underneath and they just explode and fly off to the side, and you always hear hey
Yeah.
just like some person that for some reason was still alive. You also had that cool like hoverboard thing. That was a lot of fun to get around with too.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the city, typically you still want to grab a car, but
Yeah,
there's plenty of times when you're like outside the city and it was like one like coal mining area where you just like run around on your hoverboard.
yes, that world was huge. Like that was a big game for a PS2 game.
Yeah, it's really easy to forget all the times that you're outside of the city because so much of it is in the city, and it's like that's
The city
really
was big too.
Yeah, it's like most of my memories of that game is just like running around in the city, but really, I mean, like maybe like a third of the game is not in there, and like those are kind of the best levels, I think.
I would agree. And then they went on to 3, and then they kept the city and added a whole desert wasteland on top of it outside of there. And you had all the awesome little cars, all the different kind of cars you can drive, like the Hopper and like, I think it was called the Hopper.
All about the Hopper. That is
just boom,
best
just
car,
like
in my
bounce
opinion.
over everything, just fly over all the enemies. Oh my god, that like there's so many elements to those games that I really loved. I just really wish the combat was better. Like I loved the story, I loved the voice acting, the humor was great. I just can't stand the gun combat in that game. That's literally the only thing that does it, like that ruins it for me. And you said you already said that your favorite was the Precursor Legacy. Out of 2 and 3 though, which one would you prefer?
So I think that 2 is probably the better game, but I prefer 3.
How so? Like what makes 2 better?
Well, it's more kind of focused in on what it wants to be. Because with 3, you have like a lot of car stuff that's not necessarily like doesn't necessarily meld the best with the like platforming combat. It's just like a little bit disjointed. So I think by that standard, 2 is a better game. However, 3 is much less frustrating.
I think they fixed some of the gunplay in that too.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about it, but it just felt, I don't want to say easier, but just less. It was like a more fair system. I think even like the checkpoints were a little more forgiving.
Yes, they were. I remember that. I remember the way I would actually like fight, even if it was like one enemy, you would do that. You would jump, spin, and then fire, so that way he like shoots in all directions. For some reason, that always just hit enemies like perfectly.
Yeah,
like if I couldn't hit an enemy, I would just jump, spin, and shoot. And even though I'm doing a 360, just wasting like 5 shots, I'm finally hitting that one guy.
Right.
I don't know how I even beat either of those games. They were tough games, mainly because of the controls. But
also in 3, I don't know if you got this in 2. You had it in one though. The little guy that you rode around.
The
like little Yoshi looking dude.
I was about to say Tauntaun. That's Star Wars.
Yeah.
Flut.
Yeah, Fluts.
Fluts.
There's like the one town where you just like run around on that thing.
Yes, it's the desert city.
Yeah, that dude was super cool. I'm totally about that guy.
I like that. There's a lot of good stuff in that series. But anyway, so they, keeping with their tradition, they also released a Jack X Combat Racing, which I never played, but I heard was pretty good.
You know, I thought I heard they were going to remake it.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe I misheard. I don't know. But that was always something that I figured I would go back to since I liked CTR so much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, never got around to it.
It just dawned on me now, though, like Uncharted. Actually, no, they did have a couple, but Uncharted and Last of Us are the only two franchises so far of theirs that they have not outsourced to someone else. So that they did not give up the rights to. So Crash is owned by Universal right now, I'm pretty sure, or Activision.
Yeah.
Sorry, Crash is owned by Activision. I'm pretty sure Jack and Daxter is owned by still Sony, I want to say.
I'm pretty sure Sony.
Because then they made that game Lost Frontier, which I have not played. I'm looking at, actually, where are you at? I have it.
PSP?
It's PSP, and you can get on the PS2. I actually have it right over there underneath Jack X.
Okay.
But right above Katamari Damacy. Or Damashi? I don't know. Anyway, I need to play that game.
I've heard it both ways.
I've heard it both. What's that from again? Oh my god, it's a quote from something. Damn it. Anyway, I'll if I remember it. But so they kept with that whole theme though of doing 3 games and then a racing game. And I mean, really, it only happened twice, and they stopped it with Uncharted, which makes sense.
So what you're saying
Uncharted
is
racing would have been stupid.
That we were cheated of an Uncharted racing game.
We were cheated of an Uncharted racing game. Would you have played that?
I mean,
like,
I would probably get it just because I'm such a fan. Like, yeah sure.
I'm just picturing. I don't think that. I'm just like, what are they going to throw at each other? Grenades?
Yeah, it might be like
it's too realistic.
If you went like proper kart racer where they're like maybe a little cartoony, that would probably work better. But if you're sticking with the same art style,
you do like Death Race style.
Yeah.
You ever see that movie Death Race with Jason Statham?
I'm familiar with it, but I don't think I've seen it.
Basically, it's like, what if it's post-apocalyptic where the world gets they have this whole new entertainment show. I don't think it's called Death Race, but basically they get prison inmates that are on death row and they give them a chance to compete in this where they literally kill each other. And it's like racing to the death. Like there's all these weapons mounted on their cars already, but if they drive over certain switches, then they get access to those weapons, so they can start shooting machine guns at each other, they can shoot rockets at each other, and whoever wins, like I think it's like 8 in a row or something like that, or if they survive 8 different things and they win, they come in first place in 8, then they get released, which of course that makes sense. Like, why, all these murderers,
you let the most brutal murderer free.
you let the most brutal murderer get out. Like, it makes all the sense. But Jason Statham is in it, and it's all about how it's pretty much just that. That's pretty much the shtick of it. It's a fun movie. I hesitate to call it good.
Sure.
It's fun,
like most Statham movies.
Yeah, I still think the first Transporter is a legitimately good action flick. Not like this transcendent great film, but it was good.
You know what? Recently, The Meg, surprisingly good movie.
Really?
Yeah. I really liked it.
I have not watched it. I'm not a big shark movie guy, but I've been curious about it. It got reviewed on that How Did This Get Made podcast, the one that makes fun of bad movies. So I was like, it can't be that good. But
it's one of those movies that you're like, oh man, this can't be good, right? And then you watch it and it's like, I had really low expectations, but it more than exceeded those.
So it's probably like an average movie because you were expecting like a bad movie, so you're like, okay, I can live with this.
Yeah.
I like those kinds of moments. I love things that's how I experienced Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I remember the first one going into it, and I was like everyone says this is good, but like I just don't care about Call of Duty, and like I'm tired of shooters. And then I played that game, and it just blew me away. And no other shooter has been able to hold up to it, with the exception of the BioShock games. No other shooters held up to it, in my opinion, in terms of how good it is.
Like gameplay wise, story wise, or just kind of a
Story
combination?
story and gameplay.
Okay.
Like gameplay wise, there's a bunch. Like, what is it?
Doom.
Doom was really good. That was I still like. Actually, you know what? Doom was a lot of fun. You're right. I was thinking of what's the game where it's Steve Blum is the voice of it. Bulletstorm.
Oh yeah.
Bulletstorm was a great game. That was a great shooter. That was a lot of fun. But there's no story in it. I mean, it's a very simple story, I should say.
Right.
But anyway, so let's move on. So we've talked about Crash Bandicoot, and then they moved on to the Jak and Daxter series. They then moved on to the Uncharted franchise, and Uncharted was I didn't get a whole lot of research about like the development of it, like I did with Jak and Daxter and with Crash Bandicoot. But I do know that Amy Hennig wrote the first 3 games, and then she departed the company, unfortunately. But surprisingly enough, Uncharted 4 I actually think is better written than some of the other, not all of them. I think you and I are both in agreement. Like the second one is by far the best one.
Yep.
Fight us.
Yeah, come at me, bro.
Come at me. The second one was just so damn good. Like everything about it. I still stand by. It's the only Uncharted game to actually have a boss fight, like a final boss fight. Every other single one is QuickTime events.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What was the
first
boss
one?
in the fourth one?
I think it is an escape sequence. I don't remember. It's been. A
Oh
while.
yeah, right. Because you fight the dude with the sword in like the treasure.
And it's
thing.
all. Yes, you do. That was an
Yeah.
awful fight.
It's it was a little more skill oriented
I would agree with that.
because it's still like quick timey, but you're actually like still moving around.
Yes.
Versus like in 3 where it's literally just like hit the button that it tells you to because you don't know what's happening.
Yep. And 3 could have been so good, but they had to cut like some story elements due to some weird issues that were going on. The dude from Uncharted 3 cut it. The whole reason he got cut was because of a contractual problem. Like he apparently, I guess the game took longer to make, or it was there was a mistake where he thought he had more time and he couldn't do the voice acting for it anymore. So they had to cut his character prematurely.
Ironic.
Which is why he just disappears midway through the game, like for reasons.
Oh, because he like had to jump off the tower and like broke his leg.
I remember them explaining it away, saying something as simple as he just didn't want to do this anymore.
Oh.
Like they didn't do anything. Like there's no clever write off. It was just like, and I bet you because they had already made so much of the game at that point that they're like, shit, we can't do a whole lot. We're gonna have to just deal with it, and they just kind of just dealt with it that way.
Yeah, he's kind of a secondary character anyway, so it's not that big.
But it's still, but like cohesively, but they built him up as this badass, especially in that bar fight scene in the beginning of 3. It just kind of like it went away so fast. What I love about the series though is how cinematic it is. Like there's other games that do the cinematic feel, but Uncharted just does it right. Like they make the whole cinematic feel like game like versus being like, it's like how to do cinematic wrong would be Metal Gear Solid games. Like I love Metal Gear Solid, but they have like Metal Gear Solid 4 is like an hour-long intro cutscene or something like that, hour and a half or something like that.
Yep.
And I'm sure it's good. I have not played that one personally, and I played the first Metal Gear Solid. It's the only one I've beaten, and I adored it. It was one of the best games I've ever played. And so I'm not taking anything away from those games. This is not meant to insult them, but they really like that's how you do cinematics wrong, or you make a cinematic game incorrectly in a sense, like
where it's
just cinematics,
right. Like with Uncharted, everything is cinematic, but not everything is a cinematic.
Exactly.
So it's like we'll say numerous times in Uncharted 2, like when you're running down the alleyway away from that car and you're like shooting your AK behind you.
Yeah.
It's like they could have made that in a cinematic, but then you wouldn't get that like that rush, you know?
That's very true. I
And
never
then
thought of it that way.
when the helicopter blows up the hotel that you're in and the whole building is moving and everything's shifting around. I can remember I was at my parents', still living there, and I was playing that. My dad actually peeked his head in and was like, this is really cool. And like, if the whole game was like that, he would probably just sit there and watch it like a movie with me playing it. Like it's to that point of the cinematicness.
good.
It's like
And I remember, so before my wife and I were officially even dating, like 7 years ago, that was when Uncharted 3 came out, which is 8 years ago, actually. Ugh.
Yeah, 2011.
It'll be late, so it's not quite 8 years just yet. But yeah, she came. We were carpooling to college at the time together, and she came over because she had a crush on me. Just not to brag, but she came over and just watched me play Uncharted. I think, were you there too when I first popped it in, or no?
Well, with Uncharted 3, I think we had both gotten it the same day, so I was probably at my house playing it.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
And to kind of transition into it, I would say Uncharted 3 is the game we played the most, believe it or not. Even though 2 is our favorite, we probably played Uncharted 3 the most just because of the multiplayer.
Yeah.
And the multiplayer on that was actually a lot of fun. We played it last week.
That's true. We did.
And it still holds up 8 years later, I mean, they kind of run out of stuff when it's just like co-op stuff. That's like not when you're not trying to play competitively online. But yeah, it holds up really well. It's a lot of fun. I like all the different taunts you can get. You always play as Chloe, so every time they have that treasure hunt thing, and Chloe would be like, "I got the treasure."
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Claudia Black, the voice actor. So,
voice actress.
Well, I think if you're trying to be the most inclusive, you're just supposed to say actor because they're all actors.
I mean, I always just consider it like just I mean, it's the same thing. It's just that it's just like you happen to be female who does the same thing as this person who happens to be male. I was trying to look up like what else Claudia Black has done, but I don't know where I put my phone now.
She has done. She was like the weird spider woman in Diablo 3 and Act 3.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
She was in Farscape.
The show,
Farscape. Yep, she's one of the main characters. She is also in Stargate SG-1 as again one of the main characters in like the later seasons.
You have a lot of this down. Like you said, I guess you're a big fan of Claudia Black.
I really enjoy Claudia Black. Yeah, anytime I'm playing a game or there's like a movie or something that she's voice acting in, it's like immediately I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Claudia Black.
That's
and
awesome.
Then like I like the character that much more because I'm just like it's good.
So the Uncharted series is still going on. They're probably going to make not more with Nathan Drake, but they've kind of tied up the series. But Uncharted is the first series, like we said, is to get rid of the 3 in racing game formula that Naughty Dog did. They actually made a 4th one, Uncharted 4. And what was the subtitle? So the first one's Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Second is Honor Among Thieves. Third is
Drake's Deception?
Yes. And then the 4th, I can't remember.
The Thieves' End?
I think so. I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
And that one had, I think, the best story out of all of them. I loved the whole brother bit with it. But I don't want to go into too much detail. Like I said, I want to do a full episode on these at some point. Like, these games 100% deserve an episode per game. Like,
let's wrap up this episode and just go right into the Uncharted one.
But we have to talk about Last of Us still.
Right.
But before Last of Us, 2 other offshoot games. They had Uncharted Golden Abyss for the PS Vita, which is a pretty decent game.
I thought that was by Sony Bend.
Sorry, you're right. I was just talking about the series. That wasn't developed by Naughty Dog. But the games that are... there was only one game not developed by Naughty Dog in the series, and it was Golden Abyss, because Naughty Dog did develop... what was the one that you were just playing?
Lost Legacy.
Lost Legacy, where you play as Chloe, or voiced by Claudia Black,
right.
And Nadine, who was one of the villains in the 3rd game, or 4th game, excuse me, which I conveniently forgot until I came over to your house last week.
So funny. Wait a minute, that's Nadine?
I didn't remember. I don't even remember Nadine from the 4th game, but like once you started talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a thing. Oh, now it's coming back. I'm so bad with remembering story. I remember like bizarrely specific things about like video game history, but if I play through an entire game and say the storyline's phenomenal, right? One of the best stories you'll ever see or you'll ever experience. I'll play through the whole thing and someone will be like, what did you like about it? That was great. The story is really good. It's like, oh, so what did you think of so-and-so? I'm like, who's that? It's the main character. I'm like, oh, they're fine. Like I don't understand it. Like I have a hard time remembering story beats and story elements, but I have a real easy time remembering bizarrely specific like technical aspects of like this history leading up to it.
You're like, listen, I don't remember anything about the game, but I really enjoyed it.
Exactly. I don't know how anyone trusts my opinion with anything. Come to think of it,
And
why are you all
did
listening
know
to this?
that they delayed it 2 months because of this random reason?
Exactly.
That's fascinating, Josh. Cool.
But you don't know who Nathan Drake is. But no, so the Uncharted series has kind of petered out a little bit just because the Lost Legacy was the last entry into the series so far. But it was a good game. I like Lost Legacy a lot, actually. It was a really fun one. So I'm hoping to see more. Maybe not like Nathan Drake stuff, but like I mean, I would love to see more Nathan Drake. I like that character a lot. In fact, I still lead on that as like Uncharted has written like I don't know.
Sorry.
Okay. Uncharted has written like such good characters that I'd love to have some women on, because I feel like they've written really strong female characters. I think they've had like really good, strong female leads. I know Nathan Drake is the main character, but like his wife / girlfriend in some of the other games, Elena, like is a very like deep and like has a, I don't know, she's a great character. I still remember my favorite scene in all of the Uncharted games is actually from my least favorite game overall, Uncharted 3. It's when Drake comes back from that useless ocean liner thing, which great level but has nothing to do with the story, and he comes back and it's clear that him and Elena are on the ropes with each other. Like there's some marital issue. I don't think they were they married? They were married at the time.
Yeah, I think they were like separated.
They were separated
because she was still wearing the ring.
Yes, and he comes in and he's all beaten and bruised, and she tells him where he's going to have to go next. He's like, all right, let's get going. She's like, no, let's take a minute. Let's just rest for a second. And she's sitting on the sofa and he puts his head on her lap and he tries to apologize, and before he can finish, she just goes, I know. And like that moment it felt so real to me, like that he fucked up and she still loves him and he still loves her, but they're just like bad at being together until the fourth one.
Yeah, I mean, even in the fourth one, there's like those moments where he's been lying to her and he's been off on this adventure and been telling her he was somewhere else, and then she has to come and save him, and it's like for 2 levels where they're with each other and they're talking about this stuff, and it's like, I'm uncomfortable because I don't know if they're going to be together at the end of this game.
Good writing. That's such good writing. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I really like the female characters they put into it, because they're not just like, they're not strong for the sake of being strong. They're strong because they're real, if that makes sense. They're actual characters versus like just like, how often do you see in movies where it's like, I hope this doesn't sound too soapboxy for those who may not like this stuff, but like, how often have you seen in movies where it's like, you just see like, if a girl's tough, then they just give her a buzz cut and then she's like kind of lesbian-ish almost.
Yeah, so like Alien 2.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. I mean, it's still a great character, but like, it's like, that's kind of like more stereotyping versus
That's like tokenism.
yes, exactly. And versus like Elena, and if we're going with the Alien franchise, Ripley, great female characters that feel like real people and not just like one note tricks type of thing.
Yeah, I definitely go into that more with The Last of Us.
Yeah,
as well, because like
Ellie, right?
Yeah, because
let's use that as a transition to Last of Us. So Last of Us was the other game that they've made. It's only one in the series so far, but the second one's coming out this year or next year.
I think next year.
And that series, that's a game that had such a powerful story. Like, it's one of the best. If you have not played Last of Us, go play it. Like, there may be some spoilers, just FYI, so you may want to like pause it, go play it, and just stop and like check back at the end. But like, one of the best stories I've ever experienced in a video game, and it's so good and so depressing, I can't play it a second time. So what were you going to say though about the characters in Last of Us?
So it's something that I've noticed between really all of the Uncharted games and The Last of Us is that, like, Naughty Dog is they're like a fairly liberal studio, but they don't tokenize anyone, where it's like, you have Nadine, where she's a strong black woman, but it doesn't matter that she's a woman or that she's black. She's just a strong character, and like that's just part of who
they don't
she is.
call out any of those things,
Right,
like,
right.
Those aren't part of the stories. That they just that's her. Like,
Right. It's not like, oh, well, we have a black character, and like with Chloe, it's like, oh, we have an Indian character. It's like, no, that's just
is Chloe Indian?
she's Indian, but her family, it's like her and her mom moved to Australia when she was really young.
I can't tell accents. I always thought she was English, but I guess that would be an Australian accent.
Yeah, and then you roll into Ellie, where it's like, it's never even mentioned throughout the game until the DLC, which I actually still have yet to play.
For which game?
For The Last of Us.
Okay.
That she's a lesbian, and it's like, cool. I mean, it's not like a, oh, you mean that lesbian character? It's like, no, she's just a character that
you know
happens
her
to
as
be
Ellie.
into chicks. Yeah,
And that's the thing, like I hope this isn't too political for anyone, so I apologize if anyone, if this is getting political or whatnot. We're not trying to make any points, we're not trying to have any statements about it, but I do think it's important to have stuff like this in games where it's not cliche and it's not in there for the sake, like, it's not in there for the sake of being political. It's in there for, like, we think it'd be interesting for this character to be this way, and not have that be like the focal point of that character, if that makes sense. It makes the character, it fleshes out the character as a human versus fleshing out the character to flesh it to have an attribute, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, like, it's kind of like the joke that everyone says with, like, J.K. Rowling and Dumbledore, that Dumbledore is gay.
Right.
Like, there was no, like, it's never mentioned in the book. It's never, there's no really great hint of it. She literally just added in there because she knew it would probably get a rise out of someone. I mean, that's my interpretation. I'm not saying it takes anything away from the book or adds to it, but it's like, that's the type of thing where it's not necessarily needed, versus this, where, like, they're using it as a way to build a character versus using it as a crutch to show inclusion, if that makes sense. Like, This is inclusion through a natural means versus inclusion through a forced means, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, another example would be Sulu in the new Star Trek movies.
I haven't watched it.
Okay, well, in the most recent one, it turns out, like, oh, he has, I think it's a husband. And they're like, oh, yeah, Sulu's gay. And they kind of roll it in organically enough that it's like, okay.
I do know George Takei actually didn't even want that originally, because the character was like to him that was like, you're just pandering because you know I'm gay, type of thing. So it's a very strange, like, I don't have an opinion on it, but I just remember him not approving of it or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like the way they do it in the movies is like organic enough that it's like, okay, cool. But as to why they did it, it's definitely because George Takei himself is gay.
Yeah.
And he's come out and he's like, yeah, I'm gay, but Sulu isn't. So
why are you doing it, type of thing.
Right. And so it's,
yeah.
Anyway, you don't run into any of those rocks with the Naughty Dog games. They're very,
it feels very natural.
Yeah,
it doesn't
natural.
feel preachy.
Right.
That's the way. That's the thing I'm trying to get. And by the way, for all you listening, or hopefully you haven't turned it off, I hope none of this came off as preachy. None of this conversation was meant to be that. But we just admire games that, like, have good writing in it, like, they have good characters. Regardless, like, Nathan Drake is one of the, like, he started out a little cliche in the first one, but, like, he becomes a pretty interesting character, especially in the fourth Uncharted game. And Joel in Last of Us, just to bring it back to Last of Us, spoiler alert for those who have not played it, like, I still get goosebumps every time I think about, like, the ending of that game, where you, like, you're going through that whole facility to rescue Ellie, and you kill everyone, and they could have saved the world of this virus, but because he loved Ellie too much, he couldn't do it. And you find out that you're pretty much playing the villain the entire game.
Yeah, where it's like a really human moment, because what you should do for humanity is let them, like, dissect her and figure out how to cure this. But as a human who's, like, had lost his daughter, and this is, like, his new daughter, basically, and he's just like, I'm going to be selfish and like I can't go through that again, so I'm going to save her and we're just going to continue on her.
And what's even more fucked up, if you really think about it too, is the fact that he lies to her about it. Like at the end, what is it, like the post credits cutscene or like the end cutscene is where she's like, "Are you sure that's what happened? That they just discharged me?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's all it was."
Yeah, it was.
Like,
they got it wrong.
It went from being like a human thing to being like, you're actually kind of evil a little bit. Like you lied to her about, like, because he knows if he would have told her, she might have still stayed with him, but it hurt the chances and he couldn't risk that. Just
I mean, honestly, I think that's even more human. That it's like you did this awful thing, but if you tell her about it, then it's gonna be all for naught. So it's like, you know what, man? Like, we're just gonna pretend,
ride or die.
Yeah, it's like you got to go all in on your lie if you want to keep the person you love with you. And it's,
yeah,
it's sad. It really is. But
oh my god, that game! I should really try to replay it. I never played the DLC either, just because like the first game. Like, that opening cutscene, man, it just rips your heart out. Like, it is awful and painful, but, like, I like that. I also love the fact that when that game came out, it focus tested really poorly, and Naughty Dog, the guy who was the director of it, was like, no, we're not changing the ending. Like, we're not going to do that. Like, this ending needs to be in here, and he stuck to his guns, and it paid off. It became a critical and commercial success because of it. So I like the fact that I do think that sometimes, like, I mean, we both work with creative endeavors. You're a graphic artist. I'm this.
Right.
But like, there's always a point in every bit of art, especially more often than not in film and music and stuff like that. Maybe not necessarily, at least in my medium of podcasting, but there's always a moment where like you can be too close to something and you can't I can't think of the word right now, but separate yourself. That's better. Separate yourself enough from it to like step back and look at a macro image of it. Because sometimes there's stuff that you'll keep in and like you shouldn't keep in. It's harmful to the story, but because in your head you're like, no, this is a perfect moment, doesn't necessarily serve it anymore. So you have to be able to just cut things out because it doesn't serve the overall purpose of either the story or the game or something along those lines. Movies, you see it a lot when like a scene could be good, but tonally it doesn't make sense with what was happening prior or after, so they have to nix it even though it was a good scene. In games, they do the same thing where they have to nix full sections of games because like an example that should have been done, Uncharted 3 with the ocean liner thing. It was an amazing segment, but like it felt so disjointed from the rest of the game. It really wasn't needed. Like you could have cut that out and the story would have been the same and the game still would have been good. So it felt more like fluff versus being actual substance.
Right.
So with all that said, I still love the fact that the director did that because he or she, I'm pretty sure it's a he, but was it
Neil Druckmann?
I think it was Neil Druckmann. And Neil Druckmann, and there's another guy. I'm always blanking on one of their names. I either remember one or forget the other.
Not to diminish his importance.
No, not at all. But they had the foresight to be like, no, this is important. Like, we can't give this up. Like, and I'm thankful for that because sometimes people can't. Sometimes people yield when they shouldn't, or don't yield when they should to change. And I always find that interesting when game developers are able to find that balance. And for the last like 20 some odd years, Naughty Dog has really found that balance. I mean, that's crazy thing. More than 20 years if you go back to the Jam days. With I think that first one, they were both born in 1970, so their first game came out in like 1984. I want to say like Math Jam came out in 84. Ski Craze would have been 86, and then everything after that was history. See, I can remember that shit, but I can't remember like who Nadine was from Uncharted 4.
Quick, the pirate in Uncharted 3 who puts you on that ocean liner. What's his name?
No idea.
It's Ramses.
Is it Rams? No, couldn't tell you. I remember him now. I actually remember what he looks like, and I remember the scene where you kill him in like this grand ballroom in the ocean liner, if I remember correctly, and then you have to escape.
Yeah, was he in there?
I'm pretty sure he shoots himself, and then that's what causes because the ocean liner was already capsized, and then water rushes in, and you have to escape. I'm pretty sure.
That sounds right.
But I don't know. But anyway, so that kind of takes us through Naughty Dog. That kind of we went from their old school Math Jam all the way up to their most recent stuff, which technically would, I think Lost Legacy is their most recent game, correct?
I believe so. Yep.
So all the way up to that. So final thoughts, like, is Naughty Dog your favorite developer, or I know they're definitely in your top 5, 10, something like that. But
yeah,
like,
I would say top 5 probably. It's tough because if we're rating developers, there's a lot of kind of like pluses and minuses as the console generations go by.
mm-hmm.
Where it's like, I enjoyed Crash more than Spyro, but then I enjoyed Ratchet and Clank more than Jack,
Mm-hmm.
and then I enjoyed Uncharted more than Resistance. So it's like Naughty Dog and Insomniac kind of trade blows throughout the generations.
And Insomniac, after Resistance, they went from being a Sony studio to becoming fully independent.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, sorry, they were always independent, but they went from being just Sony after Resistance, because I think their first non-Sony exclusive game was that game series, or that game Fuse, that was not very good.
Yeah, the one that was supposed to be like something like Overwatch, right? Like,
Pretty
wasn't
much,
that the
but
name of it?
EA fucked it up.
Yeah.
EA was the one. It was published through EA, and if you look at early trailers, I remember you were really excited about it because they had these trailers of it, and it was just awesome. Like all the different, like it was very funny and charismatic and whatnot. And then you go to the newer one, you go to what the game actually turned out to be, and it's just boring. It's this like really no nonsense, like clouded in like dark color tones. Like it's not good. I don't know how much EA had to do with it, but the general consensus is that they kind of fucked it up.
Overstrike is what it was supposed to be called before. I was close.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, with those trailers, and I was like, hey man, a 4-player co-op game made by Insomniac, like that's so up our alley. Like, let's play the hell out of this game.
Because like Ratchet and Clank All for One was like that, and that's a fun game.
Yeah.
Like, I think when Insomniac's allowed to do what they want to do, then it turns out really well. I mean, look at like what Sunset Overdrive was on the Xbox One. Look at Spider-Man for like the PS4. No, I'm sure Marvel had a little bit more to say, but everything I've heard about working with Marvel is that they're pretty like open to letting people experiment with it, so long as it ends up good.
Right.
So
right.
like they're pretty open with that. I know they have like bizarrely weird rules for certain things. Like you should look it up. There's like a list of rules that you can't have Spider-Man do, and it's like really strange.
You can't have two Spider-Mans on screen pointing at each other.
Well, it's more like bizarre stuff like that. Like I think I forget, there was some weird stuff. I forget what it was. I'd have to look it up. I don't want to speculate and just be wrong and then have people yell at me. But there was a lot of weird stuff like that. But anyway, so I love Naughty Dog as well. One of my favorite developers. I do think I don't want to call them my favorite developer, but they're up there. Actually, Insomniac maybe, believe it or not. But Naughty Dog I think is one of the most important ones because they even after their creators left in the early 2000s, they never really lost their mid 2000s. They never really lost their quality. Like a lot of times when founders go away, or like what made something so good in the first place, it's always hard to reinvent itself. And they've been able to do that consistently for the last couple of years, since its inception, pretty much. There's a really, to kind of close this off, there's a good anecdote as to why they are as good as they are. When they finally got a staff, Jason and Andy, to start making games, because after Way of the Warrior, that 3DO fighting game, that was the first time they actually hired any staff. All the other games they made, it was just the two of them. And they realized they needed help, so they started getting it. Well, towards the latter half of their time at Naughty Dog, they were trying to make... it was after they had left Naughty Dog, they made this company called Flector, which was like basically a video editing software, but done through a web browser, which it was like super advanced because it was like 2006. It was better than iMovie, and it was in a web browser. They ended up selling it. But anyway, so they were trying to... I don't know what exactly they were trying to do, but Jason wanted his staff to basically take their logo, and it could be no larger than like... I think it was like 3 pixels or something like that tall. Like they had, and they're like, this is impossible. We can't make an S with this. And he's like, you need to find a way. And they're like, they came back to him and say, no, it's not possible. He's like, I'll do it. And they go, okay, sure, go do it. And he comes back, and 30, 40 minutes later, he figured something out to make it work where it was legible. And I wish I could show you an image of this. It was just on the IGN article. They didn't show it exactly, but their whole philosophy is that if there's they will do everything in their power to find a way to do it. Like, it took him only 30 minutes when it took a team, like, I don't know, he didn't say how long it took them, but like to just come back with the failure of it. But they've been doing that since the beginning. Even go back to the earlier story that I said of like when they made Ski Crazed, and the way they ported art assets by hard restarting computers and getting the ROM dump and extracting what they needed. Like, they've been doing shit like this for ages. And it shows like that work ethic is still there because the games they make are still good.
Yeah, it really is amazing. If you look at all of their different franchises, the quality of the polish that they have on every one of these games is just like astounding. They're all amazing. They still hold up today, and most of the time that I don't even see anything they could do better.
I would agree. I mean, we do have our issues with some of them, like we have with Uncharted 3 and like Jak and Daxter 2 and 3, and like even some of the I don't like some specific things in Crash, but like
there's racing levels aren't great.
Yeah, but there's always. But even with all that, like you can tell how much effort they put into it. So it's not. This is like these criticisms are more coming from a place of constructive versus like being like, oh, the game just sucks. Because we like all the games they've made. There's just aspects of it that we're like, this could be better in this way, or I would have liked it more in this aspect, which some of that might be subjective, but in any case. So yeah, Naughty Dog is one of the best game developers, period. I think they're one of the best out there currently, still making games. There's been a lot of great developers that have come and gone, but I'm happy that they're still alive and thriving. So yeah, I think that wraps it up. We've been going at this for a good while now. So, yeah, Tristan, do you have anything you want to plug? Any social media stuff or anything? You can say no, of course.
I have absolutely nothing to plug.
All right, fair enough. So, new thing that I have to plug, I recently started a Patreon. So if you want to support the show, consider giving $1 a month. It helps me out with the cost of maintaining the show as well as getting upgrading equipment. And I'm hoping to get some more incentives sometime soon. You can check that out at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at stillloadingpod on all of them. Also, a shout out to the podcast network I'm a part of, Podbeard Network. You can check out all those amazing shows at podbeardnetwork.com. Some YouTube shows. We have a Twitch streamer. We got a little bit of everything to entertain your needs. That's a weird sentence. Not all those needs, but please check it out. Also check out the sponsor of the Podbeard Network, Seat Giant. Seat Giant is a ticket selling website that you can buy tickets for your favorite sporting events, concerts, shows, musicals, all that good stuff. They have great prices, so go check out the website, seatgiant.com, or if you're in Canada, seatgiant.ca, and you can use the promo code PODBEARD, that's PODBEARD, at checkout, and you'll save a little bit extra on top of that. And I guess to wrap it all up, just some last quick shout outs. Once again, shout out to the Podbeard Network and everyone on it, and the new additions to the Podbeard Network, the No Geeks Allowed podcast. That's KNOW, No Geeks Allowed. Also, shout out to my friend Erica over at the Apex and the Abyss podcast, the Drinks with Larry podcast. Both of those fantastic podcasts. Can't recommend them enough. And that should wrap it all up. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this Naughty Dog episode and the finale of the Naughty Dog series that I was doing. Who knows? Maybe I'll do an Insomniac series soon. It should be a lot of fun. Would you be down for that, Tristan?
Hey, man, I've recently been playing through the new Spyro remakes, so
I have not played a whole lot of Spyro actually ever, so I think I have one or two of them. So I'm going to play them. I'm going to play them before we do that series, but it'll be fun. But all right, so that's it for me, and that should wrap it up. So thank you all once again for listening, and I will see you all next time.